Here's how to improve your posture while sitting, sleeping, standing, and even walking. My name's Adam, and my goal today is to give you some new information that you probably never heard of when it comes to your posture. I'll be going over the basics for your sitting posture. I'm going to be talking about different sleeping positions that you should avoid at all costs. I'm going to be covering standing posture that our kids tend to mimic. And finally, I'm going to be covering walking posture that most people never really talk about. So let's dive right into it. So when it comes to your sitting position, there is basically 3 different postures you should try to avoid. So the first one is leaning over. And what this is basically going to be doing is adding extra tension and stress to the spine. And on top of that, if you're going to be doing something like working on a computer while you're leaning over, well then your upper body has to go into hyperextension in order just to look straight at your computer, whatever you're doing. So basically leaning forward is going to hurt you at the hips, at the shoulders, and at the neck. Now the second one is slouching. This is basically when you're not even sitting on your legs or your glutes anymore. You're basically sitting on your lower back, your tailbone basically. And whenever you're sitting on your tailbone, this is going to create pain in the lower back. It may create a posterior pelvic tilt, and it can even create tight hamstrings. So basically slouching is going to also mess up your posture and give you pain as well. Now the third way for your sitting posture is leaning to one side or another. When this happens, you may actually end up contracting one side more than the other, which then gives you a muscle imbalance within the hips. I personally find myself doing this all the time, leaning to the left, either watching TV or just surfing the web. And if I do begin to catch myself, I will try to compensate by leaning to the other side a lot more. But if you find yourself doing this, this could lead to pain in your lower back, especially on the left or right side. So those are your sitting postures and the ones you shouldn't really be doing. So let's now talk about how to have proper sitting posture. I'm not going to talk too much about this because I know this is all over the internet already. So I'm just going to run through this real briefly. Your eyes should be perfectly leveled or straight to what you're looking at. Your elbows and your hips should be at a roughly 90 to 120 degrees, and your feet should remain flat on the ground. These are your basics to having a good sitting position, but I'm also going to give you a few more tips to make this even more useful. Okay, so an easy tip here is to sit on the front of your sit bones. If I was to just flop down onto my chair here, and yes, I'm flopping, then all I'm really going to do is end up sitting on the back end of the tailbone as I lean back to a comfortable position. But if I simply shift my weight forward a bit, then I can push most of my weight onto the front side of that hip bone, which then levels out my pelvis here. Now, what this ends up happening is it kind of makes you in this forward leaning position now, but this also sets you up to engage the core correctly, 10% of it, engage it in order to keep yourself upright now. So long story short here, try to sit on the front of your sit bones and not the back of it. You should also make sure that the cushion underneath your seat is not too soft or not too hard. One or the other can actually put you into a slouch position or even a leaning forward position. That's why it's good to find that happy medium so you can actually sit properly within your chair. And the final little tip here is to think about how your legs are positioned underneath your desk or whatever you're sitting. Now, if you're someone who usually has their legs spread out, which is usually more men versus women, then chances are you're going to have a lot more tension on the outside of the legs, of the glutes, and all of that, which means you're also missing that tension on the inside of the legs. So if you are someone who sits on the outside with your legs spread the whole time, start practicing having your legs parallel as you sit down, and this will start engaging the inside legs while disengaging the outside. And the same thing happens here, just vice versa. If you are someone who has their legs always closed or crossed or however you have it, start practicing a little bit with the legs spread out a little more to disengage the inside and start engaging the outside. One extra tip here is if you are on your phone a lot while you're sitting, try to add a few cushions or pillows underneath your elbows in order to bring the phone up to your face. This is a little tip I got from Dr. Kelly Starrett. Now, when it comes to your sleeping posture, there is only really one bad sleeping position you can be in, and that is sleeping face down on your stomach. When you end up doing this, we have to turn our head to the left or right when we sleep face down. And because of this, the spine will actually crank all the way down to about the mid-shoulder level as you are sleeping. So not only is your neck turned to one direction, but so is every single vertebrae all the way down to about mid-back. And it stays like that for about 6 to 8 hours depending on how much you sleep. And on top of all that as well, when you have gravity slowly pushing a little weight down on your head the whole time, you now have all this extra stress on that spine that shouldn't be there. And when this happens, after a little while, you can end up having things like pinched nerves, pinched arteries, and basically just problems in the future if you are a stomach sleeper. Now, the other side of that, sleeping on your back or sleeping on your side, is perfectly fine as long as you have a straight spine throughout the night, basically. Now, you can achieve a straight spine throughout all of this by simply adding a pillow underneath your knees, by making sure the pillow in your head is strong enough to support your head so it's not kinking either way. And you can also just use a Tempur-Pedic mattress in order to have it follow the natural curves of your body. All right, up next is standing posture, and there's two main things I want to talk about when it comes to your standing posture. All right, so the first part I want to talk about is your feet. And if your feet are not pointing straight when you are standing, chances are you might have some problems in the future. A common pattern I always see among people is they either have their feet pointing inwards when they're standing still, or they're pointing out like a duck. And either way will lead to probably lower back pain, knee pain, hip pain, and more, because the way your feet are pointing is the direction your legs are going to start rotating. So if your feet are rotated inwards or out, then just start practicing having your feet pointing straight as you're standing still. Now, the second thing here when you're standing still is very similar to when you're sitting, and that is leaning to one side or another. I personally, again, when I'm standing up, I like to lean against the wall. I like to lean to one side. And if that's the case, that side you're leaning to may end up becoming more engaged than the other, which will lead to a muscle imbalance. So similar to how you're sitting and all that, if you're sitting to one side or standing to one side, then start practicing going to the other side or start practicing that neutral position. And the last part here is walking, and I'm going to be showing you 4 different pieces to your walking posture. Again, we're going to start off with the ankles. If you are walking with your feet outwards or inwards as you're moving forward, then you are adding a lot of extra stress to the inside or outside ankles. So if you think about how you're walking basically, and if you're walking with your feet perfectly straight, all that energy gets to go into the foot and into the toes and transfer out. But if your feet are pointing to the side and you're walking straight, that energy, that force you're producing as you're walking will actually go straight into the ankle instead of all the way down the foot. And this is where we begin to get things like ankle pain, early strains, and even ribs and tears basically. So if you are walking without your feet straight, your feet are pointing out or even inwards, then make sure your feet are pointing perfectly straight every single time you are walking. Now, another piece to pay attention to when you're walking and your feet is to make sure that you're walking from heel all the way down midfoot and into toe. A lot of the times, including myself, we find ourselves kind of walking either on the outside of the foot or the inside of the foot, which generally will roll the ankle one way or another, and that can right there can create extra stress and pain. So here we have my pretend shoe here. A lot of the times when we will walk and we will hit the outside of the heel and then roll to our foot, or we will go the opposite direction and then land and then push off. So what I'm trying to tell you here is basically make sure you're going straight down the middle on the toes, and you're pushing straight off the midfoot there. And one little thing you can actually look at is your shoes to see which direction you favor. So here you can see I have an old shoe, And we can actually look at the back part first. We can see that we have more wear and tear on the left side of my left foot here, which indicates that I roll on the outside foot more than I do the inside. But what's interesting about my shoe, actually I noticed, on the top part, we have a little more wear and tear on the inside versus the outside. So what that kind of tells me is I roll on the outside, I start on the heel outside, and then I move into the inside foot on the front of it. Which, okay, again, is okay. But for me personally, I'm gonna wanna try to fix this by trying to make sure I land on my heel in the middle and then pushing off the middle of my foot. And you can do the same exact thing by just looking at your shoes and seeing which part has more wear and tear than the other. Another thing you may want to notice here is your arm swings. If your arms are not going parallel with each other back and forth, but instead are doing this inwards crossing, then chances are you're going to have this super tight pec minor, pec major, anterior delt and all that, which is forcing your shoulders forward and then making it swing in front of your body as opposed to parallel. So that's another little thing you can actually pay attention to is your arm swing. What direction is it going? Okay, and your last little tip here for your walking posture is to squeeze your glutes as you're moving forward. What you can see here is the moment I step forward on this front left leg here, I have majority on my weight here. Well, what this kind of replicates, if I just lean forward and keep my same position, this kind of replicates a deadlift, right? Where if I have both legs down and I'm pulling the weight up, it replicates that in a similar way. Then I step forward. As I'm leaning forward, I can squeeze my butt up. Now, of course, this looks weird if you do it in slow motion, right? But as you're walking, you can actually begin to squeeze your butt in order to push off your heel that's in front of you, the foot's in front of you. So my right foot's in front. The moment I have a majority of my weight on my right foot, I'm going to squeeze my glute in order to project myself a little more forward, propel myself basically. So in order to actually squeeze your glutes though, and a great way to think about this is the moment you have it in a slight flexion, when the glute is a little bit stretched out, try to take the bottom and the top and pull them together. You're trying to squeeze them inwards in order to pull yourself up. And one more time here, all I'm gonna do is step forward, my leg, I'm gonna squeeze them, I'm gonna pull them inwards in order to get myself level. And that there's your last little tip for your walking posture. Now that's it for this video, and if you stuck around until the end, then I just want to say thank you. And if you know someone who can use this, make sure to share it. Other than that, my name's Adam, helping you turn your pain into strength. I'll see you later.